So not much has changed since the last scene. We're just painting some brackets, etc. Here's a box of piece parts that have been painted and cleaned and maintained. Just getting stuff ready. We're going to give the chain case a coat of just metallic gray. Just using up some material we had around here, and underhood brackets and tie rod. This is the second batch I painted. For just general painting, I like this Krylon product, and I tend to use the black satin finish. It's not as glossy as the gloss black, and it doesn't stand out as much, so I'll show you how it turns out. Well, we sanded and scraped and cleaned the chassis as best we can without bead blasting, and we gave it a coat of Duplicolor black primer. My buddy Big Jim said, if you're putting a dark color on, use black primer. It'll a lot more forgiving. Anyway, we concentrated on the parts of the sled that will show, and unless we get upside down in the corner, we should put a pretty good appearance anyway. Our next job is to start putting multiple coats of a midnight blue that Polaris used back in the day. We've got some nearly close couple of paints there. We'll see how it turns out. We have one coat of midnight blue on the chassis this morning. The base coat that I used is not quite right. It's a little darker, but we have some, our final coat will be right on. I'm just out of clear coat. I talked to Big Jim this morning, and he said yes, clear coat it for some products within an hour after you paint. You don't let it set up too much. So we don't have good clear coat in stock, so we're anxious to get this paint job done, but we'll wait for the clear coat. In the meanwhile, got good news from Brother Keith. He and Kyle will be able to surplus me a gas tank, a Wall Brothers gas tank, which will fit in here, and a set of bent bars. The bars that he has are a little bit short for those guys, and I'm just right for that. I'm a little bit on the short side myself, so we'll wait for those bars before we get too far into this. As well, he'll have some used North Star 20-inch skis, which we'll pick up from them guys when we get that far. So here's the chassis. That's the final coat of midnight blue, or what we're using is Night Watch blue from Duplicolor. Which sometimes these colors change when you get them out in the daylight, but it's very close. Now we've concentrated on the sides that'll show the most. The base coat under the hood, most of it's buggered up by exhaust pipes and engines, but the sides of the tunnel, and we're going to have a short seat on it, so we concentrated on the back, and then in around where the gas tank mounts, we gave that a pretty good shot. And the paint can says wait 30 minutes before you do your clear coat, so we've got some clear coat here. We'll give it a shot, and turn out pretty good. our chain case paint job turned out pretty good. It's got a tinge of gold to it, so we'll go with that. I just put a needle injector in and squirted some grease in the bearings, and they'll be fine. What I do have is a new old stock chain case gasket, so we're gonna just put him on and make sure it's a little different style than what Polaris used. I don't know what it's off of. I just want to make sure that our chain case cover will go on with the same bolts. It doesn't hurt to put a dab of gasket glue or good silicone on here on the back side, because when you're in a hurry and you have to go into the chain case, it's nice for this gasket to stay where it was intended to go. So we'll do that. The gap in the gasket, if you have to have one, should go to the top. That should work super. The later designs have screws around the outside, and it's a cast cover instead of a stamped aluminum. This was fine, but I think with time the mounting holes would pull in, and quite often you didn't get a good seal. This cover has a nice little check plug. I erase a trail twister, Mercury trail twister as well. It didn't have one. And all Mercury's factory manual said was to put 3 ounces in and be happy. I was always nervous looking at that chain case. Is there actually any lube in there? You could assume if it didn't leak out on the concrete floor, you're okay. But so I did tap and put some little set screws in there for a check plug. So we'll take this off and we'll actually give it some glue, gasket glue, and first we'll clean that surface. I was recently told that starting fluid, diesel engine starting fluid, is the best thing to clean aluminum if you want to use adhesive on it. So I don't know what it's going to do to my paint. Decided to put my plastic gloves back on because this gasket glue is nasty shit and it's hard to get off. And it's just about lunchtime, so I want to be in good shape for that. I'll just go in search of my cap screws to put that back together. Well, finding the cap screws was not hard, but what I'm concerned about is I don't know where I put the little metal washers with the rubber seal on the back. They'll turn up, or we'll fabricate something. If memory serves me correct, Polaris first used this chain case on a production sled in 1976 with the TXs. I don't know what year they changed up, but this chain case ran Polaris right through the 80s for sure, and possibly into the early 90s. Now I could be corrected by a good Polaris parts man, but a beautiful casting. I don't like the way the brake was mounted. In order to change brake pads, you had quite a wrestling match to take it apart, so that could have been done a little better. But other than that, yeah, very easy to work with. All the chains and all the 11 wide gears worked in this chain case. So there's good choices to be made if you want a super tune, and good availability of parts. Okay, so our paint is set up pretty good. The clear coat is semi-hard. I've been accused of trying to rush things when the build before the paint's dry, but we'll carry on. I have pre-assembled our chain case with the brake in it and the jack shaft. This all has to go together at one time, so we'll see if it'll slide in. Shouldn't be a problem at all. And cleaned up the bolts, so we'll mount this in place and check our jack shaft alignments. Something could give us a little advantage. Something went for a tumble. Bumper. We are wanting the jack shaft to sit in the middle of the bearing mount here without any great amount of tension. I haven't tightened the brake mount down yet, so we'll do that. Looks good. Next step is the left side bearing flange mount. He goes there like that. And we'll apply a little grease to the shaft. Or a lot. This is a 6205 type bearing with the locking collar. They're a little different than they used to be. You don't have to hit these with a hammer anymore. Like so. It's not quite seated far enough back yet. I'm a little concerned. And I do have those flanges backwards. I thought this put a little more attractive one on the outside in case we get some critical viewing. So now I'll take a minute and find my bolts. Well, we flipped the chassis over, and unfortunately the bottom of this sled doesn't look as good as the top right now, but we're going to rivet the belly pan on, such as it is, and we will give this a coat of paint as well. It won't be as detailed as the top. Really happy with the welds that LeQuay Welding, probably Wyatt or Kevin, did on this new front channel. I think it's going to hold up really good. So we're pleased about that. Now I wish we had a new belly pan, new reproduction from our pals down in the States, but like I said, this is a budget build, and this one is scuffed up, but it's straight, and it's of the later version where the plastic, the ABS or whatever they used, stayed quite a bit more flexible. So once we get it riveted down, again we'll give it a coat of that flexible plastic paint, and I think it'll be good enough for the underneath of a vintage sled. I'm fortunate enough to have an air riveter. If you're going to do a big job like this, or like do a Polaris track where there are 15 rivets per cleat, this is the answer. That's a good start. Some of the holes don't match up to where the rivets are supposed to go. And with the new I-beam in the front, none of those holes are drilled. Now we're using steel rivets here. I probably would be okay with aluminum, and then we wouldn't have corrosion down the line, but these are what we use on the cleated tracks, and I got a bag of 200, so we're going to use the resources we have at hand. I noticed too late that our one spindle mounting is offset because of the buggered up old belly pan. I'll have to use shims. The spindles have about a 1/4 inch tolerance on them, so they'll be shimmed out, and the other one is nicely centered, so we'll have to use a sharp tool or a die grinder to burn that out of there. We'll see how it looks. It should be a lot better now. So now we'll clean the belly pan, give it a light sanding and a good clean down with some acetone or methyl hydrate or something, and give it a little shot of paint. So we give everything a light sanding. I'm not going to put a whole bunch of effort into this rough old belly pan, but we'll give it at least a chance. I'm just using some methyl hydrate to try to cut the whatever grease film was on there. We always get some blue residue. Methyl hydrate is flammable, so we try to be cautious of that. This is our next product, SEM Color Coat Flexible Coating. It's about $18 a can at the auto body supply stores. They used to have a midnight blue, but now it's shadow blue, and it isn't quite what we want, but readily available. It goes on nice. Generally, if you're careful with your first coat, it's pretty good, especially for the underneath of a sled. So By the look of this belly pan, I'd say this old TX fought a lot of battles. Oh yeah, when I said $18 a can, that's Canadian. US dollars probably $6. So there's just a little satin black touch up on the running boards. If the sled goes upside down on the racetrack, at least we won't be embarrassed. Might be dead. It's not as gloss black. It gives you that. I've just been painted. There's the phone.